All right, bad news first. On Friday, the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals lifted the stay against the Biden administration's tyrannical vaccine mandate. I won't lie, that's a brutal setback in the fight for bodily autonomy, privacy, and constitutional order. The good news? Well, today the Daily Wire is appealing directly to the Supreme Court of the United States. What does that mean? Well, we don't know. So far, the Supreme Court has avoided every vaccine case that's come their way. But here's the thing, this case is different. The question here isn't whether or not the government has the right to enforce its rules on its own employees. It's whether or not unelected bureaucrats at OSHA have the right to coerce private businesses into forcing private employees to follow rules that the government never had the right to impose in the first place. Joe Biden himself acknowledged that he lacked this authority only a few short months ago. But lacking authority, and even admitting to lacking authority, has never stopped Joe Biden from trying to force Americans to comply with his policies. Look, we're confident in our cause. We have the rule of law, administrative and constitutional, on our side. We have the science on our side. We have the best and most moral arguments on our side. If the Supreme Court will just hear our case, we're confident we can win. If they won't, well, that won't just be a loss for us at the Daily Wire. It'll be a loss for every American. It's pretty hard to claim to be a free country when the government can force businesses to force their employees to either violate their own consciences and inject themselves with drugs they don't want, or be discriminated against at work, or be fired. At the end of the day, the government does have the power to make us all comply, but they don't have the right to make us all comply. And that's why we have to keep fighting. Sadly, a lot of companies, even many companies I admire, have already thrown in the towel. And look, I get it. If you've exhausted every effort, if the fight is lost, well, then the fight is lost. There's no reason to lose your business too. But see, that's just it. We haven't exhausted every effort. The fight isn't lost, and now is not the time to surrender. There are still 51 days left before the freedom-destroying OSHA mandate will be fully enforced. 51 days to change the course of history. 51 days to fight. So fight. You know I'm personally pro-vaccine. I mean, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine didn't prevent me from getting COVID, and the Moderna vaccine didn't prevent my wife from getting it. But the data does maintain that the vaccines dramatically reduce your chances of hospitalization and death, especially if you're in a high-risk demo. And while that's hardly what they promised us, I'll admit that not being hospitalized or killed by COVID isn't the worst outcome. So I'd recommend you get the jab if you haven't. Or don't. It's really none of my business. Especially since the vaccine doesn't prevent infection or transmission. You're free. Act like you're free. The shameful legacy of our time is that Western governments have moved so aggressively to curtail freedom in the face of this virus. That impulse, that desire to force one's will on others because you're convinced you know better than they do, well, that's a virus that's a lot older than COVID-19. And the only vaccine for that one is us. So please, keep fighting. And if we all look up in 51 days and this particular battle is lost, well, we'll all mourn together. And then we'll get back on our feet and we'll fight the next fight. No one promised us freedom. You have to struggle for it. You have to fight for it. That's the price. To fight the fight in front of you and keep on fighting until you win. So keep on fighting until you win. Onward to the Supreme Court.